Let's take a look at today's learning tools. Through today's lesson, you will be able to explain the sources and causes of algae and classify the various types of algae. Furthermore, you will be able to devise an algae management plan. Let's start our lesson. An understanding of the circulation of water in the watershed must come first in order to manage the water quality of algae. We will take a look at relevant information. As you will see, after rainfall, contaminants flow into and move to the creek, and the stream water displays quick recovery by its rapid speed. Contaminants in dam reservoirs or lakes and reservoir become deposited in a stagnant state. Particularly as the water temperature rises in the summer, phytoplankton, which is the primary producer of the aquatic ecosystem, overproliferate and causes the water quality to deteriorate, and the sedimentary contaminants may outflow during turnover to deteriorate the water quality of the lake and marsh. Now let's take a closer look at lakes and reservoir. Lakes and reservoir can be classified horizontally into epilimnion, metalimnion, and hypolimnion. Epilimnion is the layer that has the warmest water temperature and good mixability. It also forms aerobic conditions that maintain the dissolved oxygen concentration by coming into contact with the atmosphere, and it displays high transparency. This combination creates the ideal growth zone for algae and can lead to significant changes in the pH and DO, depending on whether it is daytime and nighttime. Furthermore, during the day, the pH and DO concentrations are high due to the photosynthesis of algae and turbulent fish species that inhabit the area. Iron and manganese exist in the form of trivalent iron ion, trivalent manganese ion, and are precipitated in the form of iron phosphate to show low concentration. Metalimnion is the layer that rapidly changes the water temperature and density between the epilimnion and hypolimnion that occurs around May and is most developed in August and September. There are differences depending on the scale of the reservoir, but are generally located at around 5 to 15 meters. The water quality between the layers is similar to the circulating and stagnant areas. The point of greatest temperature difference is called the thermocline and occurs in the metalimnion layer. Furthermore, hypolimnion is the layer that has a relatively low water temperature and does not mix well. Anaerobic conditions by blocking the delivery of dissolved oxygen, and with a low pH, various metal ions exist on the bottom surface. Also, the DO concentration is low to be at an anaerobic state and causes odors. Iron and manganese exist in the form of Fe+2, Mn+2. Because the pH is low, iron and manganese are released, which result in high concentrations. The flow pattern and water quality of lakes and reservoir can be explained by being largely divided into three sections. First, the stratification phenomenon and change in water quality. The stratification phenomenon is caused by a change in the density of water due to a temperature change according to the water level. It occurs in the winter and summer when there is no vertical movement of water, and more clearly during summer than winter. As discussed earlier, the concentration of dissolved oxygen is high in the epilimnion layer that is close to the water level, which is in contact with the atmosphere and results in an anaerobic state, and the lower hypolimnion becomes an anaerobic state where there is a lack of dissolved oxygen. And between the epilimnion and hypolimnion layers, there is the metalimnion layer, where the water temperature and density rapidly change. Contaminants continually flow into lakes and reservoir, which exceeds the natural self-purification capacity of water sources. This gradually deteriorates the water quality, which is further accelerated by stratification. The phenomenon of water quality gradually deteriorating due to the continuation of this cycle is called eutrophication. Next, we will discuss the water quality characteristics of dams and reservoirs. Although water quality can recover relatively quickly in rivers after rainfall, changes in the water quality of reservoirs vary depending on the characteristics of the water body. For example, the deposition of suspended solids may contribute to the deterioration of water quality, such as muddy water and excess algae. Many efforts are being made to develop and apply practical solutions to improve water quality conditions. However, there are limitations in the effectiveness of reactive actions. Thus, there is a need for further efforts to develop proactive technologies and solutions, especially for the reduction of sources of inflow. Let's now discuss the features of contamination sources. The main sources of contaminations can be divided into two types: point sources and non-point sources. A point source pollution has the feature of being caused in factories, household sewage, and excrement treatment facilities, and has a clear point of discharge. Furthermore, it is discharged at a specific point in a water source to result in easy collection and high processing efficiency, as well as having low natural effects, which signifies low seasonal changes. Non-point source pollution, NPS, can be defined as pollution that occurs on land, roads, paddy fields, and fields, and does not have any clear points of discharge, being diluted and expanded to a wider region for discharge, having difficult collection, and being affected by rainfall to result in inconsistent processing efficiency, and is affected by natural influences to display severe changes according to seasons. This definition is too similar to point source. The two definitions need to be clearly different. Furthermore, the number of advanced wastewater treatment plants for treating point source pollution is low, and they are operated individually. As such, wastewater treatment facilities should be built upstream of dams before constructing the dam to ensure point source pollution is treated, which will improve the quality of source water being impounded in a reservoir. Next, let's take a closer look at non-point source pollution. The main difference of non-point source pollution compared to point sources is that it occurs over a much wider area. Furthermore, 63% of contamination incidents occur during the raining season, from June to August, and 80% of the pollutants flow into water sources within 18 hours after rainfall events. The challenge of managing of non-point source pollution is to identify the features of contamination sources and to manage and prevent multiple small-scale contamination sources spread over a wide area. These challenges make it relatively time-consuming to select an optimum management method. Now let's discuss the classification of algae. Before we take a closer look, let's distinguish the differences and similarities of algae and plankton. For example, how do algae and plankton differ? Or do they refer to the same thing? Algae is a plant in the categories of plants and animals. Algae is an orthotrophic organism that photosynthesizes and doesn't have any partitions of leaves, stems, or roots. If so, what is plankton? Plankton refers to all animals and plants living and floating in water. That is, plankton can be divided into phytoplankton when they have plant characteristics and animal plankton when they have animal characteristics. Out of these, the group with the characteristics of both algae and plankton relates to phytoplankton. As the primary producer in the food chain of the aquatic ecosystem, the phytoplankton performs important roles like plants on land, such as supplying oxygen and becoming food for animal plankton. More specifically, phytoplankton refers to orthotrophic organisms that photosynthesize as unicellular or multicellular organisms. It has various habitats and performs the role as the primary producer in the aquatic ecosystem that produces oxygen using carbon dioxide. Plankton formed 35 billion years ago, has various sizes, and can be classified into planktonic and benthic plankton. Algae can be divided into 7 classifications based on color, type of chlorophyll, food storage substance, and cell wall structure, etc. Furthermore, phytoplanktons can be divided into 4 classes: Cyanophyceae, Chlorophyceae, Bacillariophyceae, and Dinophyceae, Euglenophyceae. In relation to the major species, occurrence time, and water color change of each class, water quality issues that occur such as toxins, taste and odor, and filter clogging will vary. Various types of algae being formed and inhabiting an ecosystem is generally considered the ideal state of a healthy ecosystem. However, phytoplanktons, which involves an outbreak of a specific species, will lead to the deterioration of water quality and cause other problems. This is known as water bloom and red tide in the sea. This indicates eutrophication, caused by a change in the water environment, such as increased water temperature and change in flux and velocity, as well as an inflow of nutrients as the main cause. The results of an outbreak of algae can cause environmental problems, such as a change in the water color to green or brown, the generation of toxins and taste or odor-producing substances, issues with water filtration, and issues in the aquatic ecosystem. When a phytoplankton occurs in a general ecosystem, nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus are consumed to improve the water quality. Eutrophication occurs due to various features of the water quality of dam reservoirs caused by an inflow of non-point sources. When eutrophication occurs, issues with the water quality occur, such as a decline in the transparency of lakes and reservoir, increased microorganisms, and reduced dissolved oxygen in the hypolimnion, which results in various negative effects on the use of water and a reduction of landscape value, and can also cause a reduction in the number of catches. When a phytoplankton, in especially HABs, occurs, especially HABs, which means harmful phytoplanktons, there are numerous adverse effects such as toxins and odor, public health, landscape value, animal health, economic loss, and ecological effects occur, as shown here. The outbreak of algae has several adverse effects. First, there is the aesthetic effects and the destruction of the balance of the ecosystem, such as odors, which occur in rivers, lakes, and reservoir. In tap water, the formation of harmful blue-green algae causes safety threats caused by the taste and odor-producing substances and toxins, and the outbreak of diatom causes a decrease in the production of tap water caused by a blockage of the filter bed at filtration facilities, and an increase in the cost of producing tap water due to an increase in the use of chemicals. Here you can see a summary of the features of diatoms and blue-green algae that generally cause issues, the effects caused by the time period of occurrence, main species, nutrition preference, taste and odor-producing substances, and the production of toxins are shown. Taste and odor-producing substances are geosmin and 2-MIB, and the main toxins are microcystin and enatoxin. The safety of tap water is threatened by the harmful toxins created by blue-green algae. The WHO limits toxins caused by algae to 1 ppb in drinking water with regard to microcystin. The key substances include microcystin, which is a hepotoxin, and anatoxin, which is a neurotoxin. As a representative case of the production of toxic substances by such blue-green algae, drinking water had been discontinued in Ohio State, USA, in 2014, when the concentration of microcystin LR exceeded the level recommended by WHO in Toledo. Let's discuss the means of managing algae. First, as an overall eutrophication reduction plan, Management strategies consist of a watershed plan, water intake plan, and filtered water treatment plan to reduce the generation of algae caused by an increased inflow of nutritive salt and sunlight. The watershed plan includes the operation of aerators, the installation of shading screen, and the spraying of soil, among which the spraying of soil had been used previously, but has rapidly decreased due to its effects on the ecosystem. The water intake plan includes the installation of a blockage of the inflow of algae and selection of water intake, and the filtered water treatment plan through the strengthened management of treatment processes, pre-chlorine treatment, and the input of activated carbon. As a government strategy, a phytoplankton response and management plan has been established and is divided into 4 stages: pre-prevention, monitoring, and prediction, construction and operation of an effective phytoplankton response system, and lastly, the establishment of a dedicated center responsible for strengthening communication among all stakeholders. In the pre-prevention stage, cooperation among relevant ministries is undertaken to inspect, detect, and manage contamination sources. As well, contamination reduction projects are initiated in the upstream of water supply sources. Lastly, the standards for managing wastewater effluent are strengthened to reduce the inflow of contaminated sources. In the second stage, governmental support on the research and development of the algae warning system is expanded and includes the application of 3-dimensional algae monitoring using a multispectral sensor-equipped unmanned aerial drone for imaging, as well as satellite imaging. Furthermore, sensors are used to collect real-time data on the water quality and flow of rivers in the upstream of dams. Lastly, a monitoring system is developed and applied to analyze inflow load in real time. Next, in order to construct and operate an effective algae response system, algae reduction equipment must be applied for the improvement of algae in rivers through the linked operation of dams and weir, and the use of water circulation equipment. Although algae can be directly removed using an algae removal ship when needed, the inflow of byproducts of algae must be minimized through selected water intake, and advanced filtration treatment technologies must be implemented to strengthen the filtration treatment process. The establishment of a task force team strengthens communication through the transferring of algae-related data and information. Thus, an effective network being the head office and branch offices can be established. Furthermore, there is a need for efforts for stakeholders from related organizations, external advisory boards, and local residents to actively cooperate in decision-making processes. Let's discuss the establishment of technical strategies for algae management. As you can see, K-Water has established an optimum total solution system. The strategies for algae management are continuously being established through general technological development, such as technology for obtaining real-time monitoring data in every basin, analyzing and disseminating the obtained data for predictions and decision-making purposes, and lastly, converging the obtained unit technologies, upgrading to eco-friendly technologies, and reusing energy production in order to ultimately establish a decision-making system for algae management. To determine the effectiveness of various technologies and methods, we applied HAB's control technologies at different sites and environmental conditions. For example, we applied approaches in consideration of site-specific conditions such as tributaries, point sources, curved areas, and areas close to intake facilities for water treatment plants. To date, we usually apply physical tape technologies like surface mixers, solar panel mixers, and HAB boat or truck type collectors. Furthermore, surface mixers were experimented with to determine the effectiveness of managing algal scums. The surface velocity was measured according to the operation of the surface mixer, and the results demonstrated that velocity increased by 0.2 meters per second and affects an area up to 20 meters. Here you can see 2 types of aeration devices, convector type and diffuser type. The effective range of the convector type was 30 to 50 meters, while the diffuser type was 20 meters. Both types of devices performed water flow mixing from the bottom to the top and altered the condition to an aerobic state. Furthermore, they prevented the water body from stratification, and ultimately, they were effective for controlling HABs in the water body. On this slide, you can see a lateral type current diffuser. This device rapidly increases the water flow by way of pumping and aeration. The image on the bottom left shows the state of the water body before and after the application of the lateral current diffuser. Even though we applied several types of technologies to manage HABs, the occurrence of HABs still remains in some areas. In cases like this, we used equipment to physically remove dense algae from the water body. Physical removal is a simple technique, but to increase the removal efficiency rate, we are developing ways to upgrade this equipment. In some cases, we use chemicals to increase their effectiveness. In other cases, we used chemicals to increase the density and buoyancy of algae particles, which made it easier for us to physically remove them. Rapid responses are very important and can be achieved by applying advanced monitoring technology among various technologies for algae management. The image shown is a screenshot of the monitoring software used that displays data for specific points, method and type of technology installed to monitor the Nakdong River, which is one of the 4 major rivers in Korea. After selecting the severe regions, including the main streams and branches, monitoring is continuously performed for algae management. To enhance water quality, regular water quality research is being conducted. The state of water quality is being ascertained, and a more precise analyses and site research are being conducted using human resources to perform water quality analyses upon taking samples and sending to a laboratory, and then the results are shared. Furthermore, if there are any problems or abnormalities in the water quality, the findings are immediately shared to ensure efforts are being made to resolve the issue. In addition to rapidly obtain more precise data, online real-time analyses are conducted. Various types of devices are installed and operated in order to obtain real-time data, such as data on the water temperature for each water level to determine the generation of a hydrothermal stratification layer and a measurement of dissolved oxygen to determine the generation of an oxygen depletion layer. Furthermore, to determine water quality, which is difficult to obtain during rainfall events, the water quality of the main branches vulnerable to contamination is monitored by installing an automatic water quality sampler. Furthermore, K-Water is providing test beds for small and medium enterprises, SMEs, to evaluate their new technologies for algae management. The images shown is of a stagnant area in the Yongsan River, and it's a test bed site for SMEs to evaluate phytoplankton-related technologies. As a program that provides SMEs the opportunity to evaluate technologies in a natural environment after evaluating the developed technologies on a laboratory scale, the program has been continuously in operation since 2014. The inflow of the non-point source pollution during rainfall events greatly contribute to the deterioration of the water quality of dam reservoirs. Therefore, the management of non-point source pollution is an important part of water quality management, especially during the winter, and various efforts are being made to minimize the inflow of non-point sources to dam reservoirs during rainfall events. Due to the lack of precipitation in the winter season, excessive amounts of fertilizer, neglected livestock excrement, and other contaminants build up, making it non-point source pollution difficult to manage when the rainy season commences. Furthermore, efforts of reducing the inflow of non-point sources are being made by ascertaining the features of inflow of non-point sources. Furthermore, K-Water is also making various efforts to preserve aquatic ecosystems, as shown in the images. Various efforts are being made, such as protecting the spawning areas of aquatic life, management of fishways, and protection of natural habitats. Lastly, artificial wetlands are being constructed in the upstream of reservoirs as a natural-based solution, NBS, to treat non-point sources and wastewater treatment effluent coming from mountainous areas and agricultural areas. These wetlands act as a natural filtration system for the inflow of non-point sources, thereby reducing the inflow of contaminants to dam reservoirs.